Today, we are joined by Karen Hao, an award-winning journalist and editor of Empire of AI. She has spent years reporting on the social impact of artificial intelligence and was the first journalist to profile open AI. Her work has appeared in publications including The Atlantic, and she also co-created the Pulitzer Center's AI Spotlight series. In Empire of AI, she examines the rise of OpenAI and the wider power structures shaping today's AI industry. Karen, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, start with the interview. I have few questions, but we have also time. So, take your time on answers. With Empire of AI, what story did you want to tell? And what message do you hope readers will take from the book?
When I realized that I wanted to work on a book, I was thinking about the kind of book that I would have wanted if I had begun my journey in understanding artificial intelligence after ChatGPT. I'm very privileged in
Yeah.
that I started reporting on AI in 2018 when it was a much more calm information environment where I had plenty of time to read the research papers, to really get a grip with the technology, the technical
Yeah.
details, the social details. And so I wanted to give people a single artifact that they could pick up that would tell them the history of AI, that would tell them the history of ChatGPT, and also help them understand the broader implications. And the central argument that I lay out through the book as well is this idea that the current trajectory of AI development is not the right trajectory. I think that it is deeply harmful. It has a lot of environmental, labor, public health consequences. And what I hope people realize through the story of OpenAI and through the other stories that I tell of
Yeah.
communities around the world, that they begin to realize that there are other pathways of AI development that we could in fact take that would be more broadly beneficial.
Good. And let's talk about the word that you use in the title of your book, because you use empire and then colonialism. So why did you use these words?
Empire is the only metaphor that I've ever found to encapsulate the scale of these companies and the magnitude with which they operate and the extraordinary economic and political power that they've consolidated such that they have become the supreme powers in the world. They're pretty much more powerful than most, if not all, governments at this point. And this empire helps to describe that end state, but it also helps to describe the tactics that they use to accrue that power. That is the dispossession of the majority. They lay claim to resources that are not their own, data of individuals, intellectual property of artists, writers, creators, the land that they need to build their data center facilities, the energy that they need to power them, the water they need to cool them. It also talks about the labor exploitation that is involved in the production of these technologies and the exploitation that happens once these technologies are deployed in the world and automate away jobs. And it references the ways that these companies control information in society, both the fundamental science around AI research. They hire most of the AI researchers in the world and then censor and control what they can actually publish, but also in the way that they then tell the public and tell policymakers that they have a monopoly on AI expertise. Therefore, you can only trust what they have to say about what this technology really means, and the ways that they're building generative systems that they intend to be a portal for people into the world of information. So they even control how people consume their information these days. So this is, all of the different facets of how they operate just have such stark parallels with the way that empires of old also amassed and exercised their power.
Good. And there is a moment in your book when you realize that OpenAI was less transparent. So, what this mean for us as humanity?
Yeah, well, OpenAI was named OpenAI because they said that they would be
Yeah,
open.
they were.
They would publish all of their research. They would open source the code and allow anyone to download and play with it. And when I went to their offices and embedded within the offices for 3 days back in 2019 to write my profile for MIT Technology Review, that was when it suddenly dawned on me that this was the most secretive organization I had ever covered. And when I spoke with employees with unsanctioned interviews, by connecting with them in a
Yeah.
private context, they also told me it was the most secretive company that they had all ever worked for. And what I realized was while they continued to project this idea that they would share everything, they were in fact hiding a number of projects that involved beginning to commercialize when they said that they were a nonprofit that didn't need to commercialize and didn't want anything to
Yeah.
do with that profit motive. And also with trying to build much larger scale systems on this pursuit of quote unquote artificial general intelligence, this theoretical AI system that they thought and still think that they can achieve to match human capabilities. So they were hiding all of the most crucial parts of their research as well as their strategy.
This was the strategy. But what if there is an empire, like in Rome, there was an empire. So we know that Julio Caesar was the emperor. But what is the role of Sam Altman in this empire?
I don't think it's a coincidence that when Sam Altman officially became the CEO at the company in 2019 was precisely when the organization started becoming much more obsessed with commercialization, with expansion, with scaling. And, before he was a co-founder, but he was actually just the co-chairman.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it was 2019 when he steps into this role and he writes this memo that I got. It was an internal document that I got for my book, where he says, we need to scale 10x and 10x and 10x more. And this is a philosophy that he brought with him from his earlier days when he was a president at Y Combinator, when he was funding companies in the startup incubator.
Need to scale.
And he also said, I'm going to fund 10x more companies every year until I've funded every single company in the world. And so this kind of ideology of wanting to scale until you've encapsulated everything under the sun was something that he really supercharged at the company. And that is when you could say that their empire building fully blossomed as a core strategy for the org.
In this edition of AI Week, I heard about AGI a lot of times. It is like in the moment like a religion. But what there is still a definition for you in reality of this AGI?
The problem with this definition, this theoretical AI system that matches human intelligence, is that we don't have scientific consensus around what human intelligence is. We don't have that definition from biology, psychology, neuroscience. And so, in this vacuum of scientific meaning, basically these companies can define AGI to be whatever they want it to be. So by my count, OpenAI has used at least 4 different definitions of AGI. On its website, it says highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. So it's a labor automating definition. And then in its contract with Microsoft, it says a system that will generate $100 billion of revenue. So it's a financial definition. When Sam Altman talked to US Congress, he said it's a system that can cure cancer, solve poverty, solve climate change. So that's a societal impact definition. And then when he's talking with consumers, he's like, it's the best digital assistant that you've ever needed or didn't know that you needed. And it's obviously to motivate consumers to buy his product. So every single definition is meant to motivate that particular audience to do something in service of the company, in service of the empire. But these are not actually coherent definitions. They don't paint a single technology. It's basically just a vacuous term that they can shape shift around so that they can orient the goalposts wherever they need to go.
Today and yesterday, we had a lot of questions about AI, and also you, I think, in your interviews. No, at your point, what is the right question that all of us should make us about AI today?
Which kind of AI should we be building? That is the most important question. I think we currently in AI conversations have just assumed that AI is one technology. I mean, of course, people within the AI space have more nuanced conversations about this, but generally speaking, I mean, even the fact that we use AI is difficult because AI literally refers to so many different types of technologies. So what kind of AI are we actually talking about? And when we only use one term to describe all of these different things, what happens is then people's imagination about what is actually being talked about begins to converge around just the dominant modes of AI development, which is these large scale generative AI models that are being led by the empires. But there's so many other conceptions of AI. There's so many other imaginations of what AI could be. AI's been around since the 1950s. We have all of these different other more specialized AI models that don't require the enormous amount of resources of these generative systems and provide significant benefit in regards to accelerating drug discovery or improving
Yeah.
healthcare outcomes or mitigating the climate crisis. But those technologies aren't being invested in because all of the capital and all of the attention and all of the talent is going into these large scale systems. And so I think if we continue to stay focused and ask ourselves, which AI technologies do we actually want to build? What path of AI development do we actually want to take? We can then urgently shift the resources away from this black hole vortex of generative AI investment towards the types of specialized systems that we actually need as a
Yeah.
society.
Yeah, you talked about capital, no? And I need to know where they come from and where they are going to. What is your point?
The capital, I mean, so last year in the first quarter of the year, almost half of the venture money went into OpenAI and Anthropic, just two companies, both of which are engaging in the identical scaling approach.
Okay.
But where did that capital come from? I mean, there was a huge drop in investments in climate technologies because the very same investors that used to put their money in climate technology shifted over to scaling AI models. And so this is what I mean by it's kind of a black hole. It's not just a black hole for different types of AI development pathways. It's a black hole for just investing in literally other types of technologies in general that we urgently need in society. And that is a deep misallocation of resources.
The capital comes from US and the power of application they made in China. What is your point on European ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think that the European ecosystem has done well is to actually establish real governance structures that are protecting the rights of Europeans. Like as an American, I still don't have a federal data privacy law. So my data can just be consumed by these models, bought and sold by hidden data brokers. And it makes it much more difficult for me to engage in a digital life without feeling kind of at threat and at risk of my privacy all the time. And that is part of the reason why, and I think it's a success story of this governance, that Europe doesn't have a large extractive exploitative AI giant like these US companies. The thing that Europe is missing is a vision for an alternative version of AI that people can rally around. So whereas it's very clear what we're fighting against, it's not clear what we're fighting for. And I think right now, because there's an absence of that strong alternative vision, there's now a lot of concerning discussions within the European Commission and other parts of the EU Parliament that are beginning to wonder whether they should in fact unwind some of this governance to chase the same scaling approach that these US companies are chasing to quote unquote catch up.
Yeah.
And what I always ask, European policymakers is, but how are you defining the race in which you're trying to catch up? If you're trying to ultimately catch up in a race to the bottom, that really doesn't actually work out well for anyone. It's actually going to erode Europeans' rights in that pursuit. Rather, you should be focused on what are the alternative visions that really center European values and have nothing to do with scaling these AI models. Focus on building the specialized systems, the efficient systems that protect human agency, protect planetary and community health. And those systems, because you will be taking a different approach, also then will not be nearly as capital intensive. And therefore, you don't need to replicate the
Yeah,
VC
sure.
high risk capital investment model anymore. You can focus on the resources that you already have in Europe to build a really robust and vibrant AI ecosystem.
And maybe maintain our identity, no? As
Yeah.
European.
Yeah. And then show true leadership in the world for what this technology can look like separate from a deeply extractive model.
Yes. So thank you, Karen, for being with us here in AI Week and in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And grazie. Grazie mille, Karen.
Grazie.
I really appreciate it.